Good morning, afternoon, and evening to our listeners from across the globe. Welcome to in12d. Today, the magical team is over here. The three of us, myself, Ramsey Chiri, Kathy Pratt from Vermont, and Susie from Ireland. We have a special guest with us. I'll just send the ball to Susie. Go ahead.
Hey, welcome everybody. I'm so excited about this episode. We have an amazing, inspirational guest this week. And the theme of this week's episode is a bridge between the seen and the unseen. And we're going to explore how mindfulness, energetic awareness, and intentional action allow us to lead from the heart. And to take us there, we have the lovely Shey, and she's affectionately known as Shey. Her title is Sherab Khandro, and based in, I think, Virginia at the moment. For 15 years, Shey was a Buddhist nun, and she's now a spiritual mentor, a fine artist, a coach, among many things. I'm really, really delighted that you're here, Shey. I'm really, really grateful. So,
Welcome.
welcome to In12D.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure.
And basically, we want to just kick off. Like, there's just so many questions going around my mind that I'm like, oh my gosh, we get to ask Shey loads of stuff. But I'm really curious. You know, we say that we talk about every week the guests are coming from this kind of moving and shifting in their lives from like an ordinary level of consciousness to something quite extraordinary. And I'm going to go straight in with the question that won't go away out of my head anyway. It's how do you find your way in to become a Buddhist nun in the first place? And then when you've answered that, what happens? What's the moment when you feel, okay, it's time to move out? So if you're happy starting there, we would love to hear some of your story about how you got going in your journey.
I love both of those questions, Susie. Thank you so much. And they really do point to some powerful things in a life. Oftentimes when someone asks, how I became a nun or why I became a nun, the short answer is just that I was in pain. I found the world to be a little confusing the first few decades, and then I sort of stumbled quite by accident into this extraordinary woman who ran a Buddhist temple near where I was working in Bethesda, Maryland at the time. And I visited the temple, and it changed my life. The opportunity to connect with a philosophy that is completely centered in living life, centered in compassion, centered in your heart. And I had the opportunity to take a really deep look at not only what was going on inside myself, but what was going on for all living things in the world. And from that space, my heart was opened, and I just had to take the next step. And so I studied there for about a year before just a series of between empowerments and teachings and study and conversations with some of the other members of the community. My heart just kind of fell open like this, and I found myself intrigued by the idea of ordination as a nun. Now, when I first got there, it was the late 80s. I had big hair and sculptured nails and a sporty car. And, I just was in a total worldly vibe, right? And no one would have thought that would have been the choice that I had made. But something in my heart called me to action. And I want to point to that as a theme that has continued through my life. And I made a choice that felt radical to me at the time. It certainly was an unexpected choice to my family and friends at the time. And I have never regretted having made that choice, because the opportunity to live a life that was with focus and purpose, that was bigger than myself, just felt Well, it felt aligned. That's the word. Extraordinary was the first word that came to mind, but aligned is really the truth of it. I've come to realize in my own journey that it feels as though this is something I came into the world to do, and that was just a step on the road. And it was the early challenges that actually were in contrast to what was being offered that um, made me feel so compelled to want to step onto that path. And it was a very rich experience. And I am an artist. I had not really explored art in the early years. It was something that was not taken seriously. You know, it's like, that's lovely, dear. What are you going to do for a real job? You know, that kind of response. Everybody who said that meant well. You know, it was my spiritual teacher that saw something different, and it was my art and my spirituality developed together, so they are inextricably woven together. And during that time of study as a nun, I often say, with my little shaved head and my burgundy robes, you know, it was quite a shift in perspective, and there's many stories to tell about all of that. But I did end up focusing particularly on the sacred arts and studying within the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Our community built stupas. They're sacred monuments that often contain relics of the Buddha. They are sprinkled around many of the landscapes of many countries where Buddhism has taken a deep root. And now there are many stupas here in the United States as well. And they are focuses of pilgrimage and objects of prayer and setting intentions for one's life. And that's a whole nother deep, wonderful, beautiful conversation. It was the opportunity to be a part of all of that. So then one would ask, you know, with the richness of the journey and all of those beautiful things happening, why would I I call it retire my robes, but it was, again, a very distinct moment where my heart said, it's time to go. And
Wow.
I was probably as surprised as anyone else. And it's not something that was really super well received by the community. And I was encouraged not to make that choice. And at the same time, well, I had a bit of a vision, but I'll tell you that a little bit later. And I knew that it was time, and I just needed to honor that with myself. And so it had its challenges, you know, just like going in, there were people in my life that were resisting my making that choice. In coming out, there were then now people in my life that were resisting my making that choice. And yet I feel like that my teacher had always said to me, we had a very close relationship, and I carry her in my heart to this day. She really transformed everything and set me on a course that I believe aligns with the highest intention I might have chosen for my life. But she used to always say, I wonder what my students are going to do with these teachings. I wonder how they're going to make them their own. And even though my choice wasn't well received, I did feel, and I could be wrong, but I did feel like that's exactly what I was doing. I was taking what I had been given, and I was owning it, and then I was following what I'd been taught to do, which was to seek counsel through my own heart and the wisdom that lives there. So I did. I set off on a new path.
Wow. That's brave. That takes so much courage. Like, because, I often feel like, gosh, wouldn't it be lovely to be a nun in that community, in that sanctuary, in the ancient teachings? It always feels to me like it's a place where you're really going to be held. And you kind of don't have to worry about the outside world. That's my illusion of it anyway. But, to follow that guidance, that inner guide, and like, obviously we know where you are now, so it's phenomenal how it clearly was the right move for you based on kind of where it took you.
I'd love to address something that you just said about that illusion. And
Yeah.
I will say that particularly on the Buddhist path. Now, I studied in a monastery here in the United States, and unlike like a Catholic monastery, the Buddhist communities don't have that same support that the Catholic community can offer. You don't check into the monastery and then suddenly you don't have to worry about finding a place to live or renting a place to live or supporting yourself. We were very much in the mode of pioneers. So we were responsible not only for the liturgical calendar, not only for our personal practice and attending the teachings and the empowerments and maintaining the temple itself, but we were also responsible for our own support. And so we worked in the world. There were many people that would sought to align their work with sacred purpose in some way. That was something that I did. When I first took ordination, I was actually working in a corporate environment, and I was wearing suits, and a little makeup and some jewelry, and I could not. And my teacher said that for the first steps, she's like, just roll it back a little, shorten your hair, less jewelry, maybe not such a short skirt, and you can come home in the evenings and then get in your robes and go from there. I could never reconcile that. So I very soon abandoned the corporate kind of life and sought to find something that would allow me to focus on the temple first. And I took a number of different positions, kind of odd jobs and things like that, until I ended up starting a little casting and molding studio under the auspices of the temple. And we were marketing little art projects and little images of the Buddha around the country and things like that. So I was looking for creative ways to support myself and be able to focus more specifically on supporting the temple. So and so it wasn't, it was, and for anybody that has stepped onto a spiritual journey where you are all in, it is, what do I want to say about that? I don't want to ever make it sound like it's not the most delicious thing to do. And it is also exposes you to so many things about yourself that you might not have wanted to see. And it really helps you to grow in ways unexpected. So it was a deep incubation in that way. And I wouldn't do it any different. I also know to walk a deep and profound spiritual path, you do not have to shave your head. You do not have to go into a monastery or a cave or climb up on top of a mountain. It can be done in everyday life, in the life that we're living now. And I do believe that was part of why our community, and why my life had me here in America was because this is a truth. We can use every experience of our day-to-day living to return to our heart, to learn to choose compassion, to be more loving, and to be more kind. And so, yeah, thank you for pointing to that, Susie.
Well, thank you for clarifying it. Wow, I had such a delusion around all of that. So that's really shifted. It's increased my massive respect for you even more now. It's like, whoa, wow.
It had its challenges too, to be out in the world with no hair and with unusual clothes and no more makeup, no more jewelry.
Mm.
It was you can feel the difference. There was a time when, I'm almost 6 feet tall and rather long and lanky, and I loved my wardrobe, and I could, I would command a space, when I would move into one. And then when you took away all the trappings, then people didn't respond to you the same way. They looked at you like there was something strange, or they might have even been kind of fearful. Of course, that's changed over time. This was back in 1990s, so we're an awakening culture, really. But at the time, it was like becoming a bit of an oddball. Which is also another teaching, right? It's like,
Yeah.
the outer trappings aren't all that. So
I
anyway.
have a question. You made it sound so eloquent and easy when your world falls apart and you decide to join a monastery. When my world fell apart many, many, many years ago, I really wanted to sit in a cave because I couldn't find any other place in my mind that is so quiet and away from all the squawking of the world.
Yes.
How did you manage to recompose that and get it all together? It took me a long time to get myself back on track. Let me tell you, it was a hard journey, but it sounded from the way you described it is that you were aware of the new sprouting of what do you call it, consciousness that is coming through you, and you were able to engulf it in a way to protect it from being bombarded by the sounds of the world. I hope I said that
That's
correctly.
beautifully said, Ramsey. Yes, beautifully said. I had an extraordinary teacher that introduced me to the path, and
Mm.
I felt like she could see me and that I was safe in that falling apart. And my world had felt so challenged for so long. I had been looking for, why am I here? This place doesn't even make sense. It's like there's so much contradiction in the world, and people speaking kindness out of one side of their mouth and hypocrisy out of the other. And it was painful. And I felt like I had found someone that had some ideas about life that I resonated with, and I could feel the truth of that in my heart. And even when it was crazy, I remember one time very early, it was before I took ordination, just a couple of months before, and I remember kneeling on the lawn. It was a beautiful lawn at the temple, and everything was kept so nicely. And I remember kneeling there thinking, this place is so crazy. And I said, but I can't leave. There was something in it that was truth. It was a path of compassion, and it was a path of seeking to understand the nature of the world and seeking to understand the nature of my own existence. And these were things I wanted to know more about. And so and I do believe fully, Ramsey, that opportunity to fall apart is the opportunity to find our way. And so when we're challenged and when we are then called to look at things differently, then from there isn't a chance to see anew, and see something fresh. And to look through the eyes of compassion. It felt so fresh. It felt so healing that I knew I was in the right place, regardless of whatever pushback came or, whatever comforts I might not have had that I had been used to, whatever ease had been available. And to sit at the feet of those great teachers and to listen to the nectar of what they shared. Part of the human condition is doubt, and we doubt ourselves, we doubt each other, we doubt the truth of this and that. And when I could just leave the doubt at the door, when I would walk into a teaching room, and it's very ceremonial, but when you're in the company of these teachers, there's like a nectar that's poured into your hand, and you taste and you put it on your head, and then you go in and you sit down with intention. And then I could listen from that space. I could listen without that, letting that doubt color what I was hearing. And it allowed it to permeate my being in ways that I know I wasn't aware of, and I may still not be aware of. But I know that I carry something that has changed my life and feels like it can be of service to others as well.
That's beautiful.
That's gorgeous, actually, and it's funny how it takes you from 0 to 100. Although the time is of no time, but if we look at it, it's a split of a second where you go from complete darkness into complete light, and your whole perception of life changes. It's just a profound, like, I would say something, even I know how painful it is when you go through that. It's extremely painful just to shed whatever you're holding, but it is the most beautiful gift anyone can ever receive.
And the most beautiful gift someone can give to themselves.
Yeah.
Because it was a choice that it had to be made. I mean, that's not exactly how I want to say it. It wasn't happening in my head. It wasn't something that was logical. There were pieces of it that if I had taken the time to really think it through, I probably would have talked myself out of it. But instead, I have found that impulse to listen to that small, quiet voice inside is so important. It has marked my journey in powerful ways. So, thank you.
Shay, what if we wove in your life with art into the conversation? I'm curious how the art mixes in to this story.
Oh, I love that question, Kathy. Thank you so much for that. Because, I felt like an artist all my life, but then I also felt like it was being dismissed. And then when, so I just did it in moments where I wasn't doing other things. And then when my teacher said, well, you're an artist, I was like, what? I said, well, if I was, what would I do? And she gave me the best advice that I think an artist could ever get. And she said, just play. And she said, do not go to school. She knew it's not that school is bad. School is wonderful. And in many ways, I wish I had had the opportunity to explore in school. But what she knew is that I would get trapped in the shoulds and supposed tos and that kind of energy. And that what I needed to do was just go be alone with my heart and connect with joy and playfulness. And so I had permission, and I had someone I admired that had confidence in me, that was inviting that possibility.
Well, and she gave you that title.
Yes.
We separate ourselves from saying I'm an artist.
People do. Oh, and I've got a lot to say about that, because you don't even have to be, I mean, I'm not painting now and I'm not sculpting now, and I'm still creating as an artist. And I hope we have an opportunity to talk a bit about that. But I began to, I took an interest in the sacred arts. Tibetan Buddhism has a lot of imagery. And as I mentioned, we were a community of stupa builders. So there was opportunities to get my hands into many different things. And I did. I just dove right in, and I studied with some of the Tibetan masters. I went to visit this Hindu temple that wasn't far from where we were in West Virginia. And the temple was in West Virginia. And I followed this guy around that was a sculptor and a mold maker. And it was the classic, sweeping the floor so that he would teach me about what he knew. And I stayed with them on different occasions, and we would chant together and share philosophical ideas. But the sacred art was always rooted in intention and purpose. And that was something I loved. And I remember I was mainly focused on sculpting while I was in Maryland. And then when I moved to Sedona, we had moved there to build a stupa. There's a 36-foot stupa in Sedona that I had the incredible good fortune to be a part of, and was responsible for many of the sculptural elements. But I remember one night I was working in my studio, and I was a bit of a night owl. And I was kind of walking up and down, and I was thinking, what have I got to say to the world? What am I going to say through my art? And what is that going to look like? And in the course of developing as an artist, I actually did take 3 classes. And it was because I was afraid of color that I went to explore. I took a color class, I took a design class, and I took a drawing class. And each one taught me something important. And in the color class, I was exposed to pointillism. Mm-hmm. And in this moment in my studio in Sedona, it came roaring up inside of me. And it was like, you need to paint big paintings with little tiny dots. And I was like, what? Because at this point, I knew that this voice was what I wanted to listen to. And so I pulled out all these boards. That was what I had, flat surfaces. And because I would build things. I wasn't really a painter with canvases. And I started doing some drawings on them. And then I came up with something that I thought would be a great first painting. And it was a face of one of the deities in the Tibetan tradition. And I began to fill that in with these little dots. Well, here's what I recognized very quickly. Each one of those dots is an intersection of time and space. And had to wonder, what am I going to do with this moment? Am I just going to make this ordinary little dot? Of course I could. But what if I put an intention in there? What if I imagined that this dot held the blessings of offerings of jeweled universes that were expanding into space? And I thought, now that's a dot I can get behind, And so the paintings just became every section of one of my images, and you can find some of them on my website. And there are paintings in Sedona. There, I have represented as by the Goldenstein Gallery there. But every section, like if it was a blue area, it had not only blue, but it had violet, and it had blue violet, and it had green, and it had blue green and blue, and then it had 5 shades of each of those colors to give it dimension. And then once all of that was laid out in these intricate images, then I would add the complement. So in the field of blue would be a little bit of orange, because blue never looks bluer than when it's with a little bit of orange. And so at that point, the whole painting would just relax, and it would just pop open. And it was, as an artist, it was so exciting to watch that process. And as a spiritual person, it was also very inspiring to feel like there was a purpose and an intention that was coming alive. Now, I'll say one more thing about that. In Tibetan Buddhism, these images, if you're painting the deities, it is a sacred practice, and it is a practice of, actually, the artist trains in, of course, the qualities of the Buddha. I'm still working on that. And you arise as the deity, and then you are invoking the deity. And each canvas then becomes this living presence. Mm-hmm. And so this idea of inviting the deity forward with these offerings, with these intentions, it just felt so empowering. I was in love with that technique. And when I retired my robes, I began to explore other imagery, things, images from nature, the butterfly, the dragonfly, blooms of a flower or something. But I would always remember to bring that prayerful intention to what I would do.
I can really vouch for that living presence in those paintings, because when I first came upon them in person, not online, was when we were doing a teacher symposium in Sedona. And I had gone in ahead with Sarah to the room to kind of set up the space for the teachers coming in for the weekend. And the energy just blew me back out the door. Like I was like, whoa, like where did these come from? Like there was a sacredness to them. Like you could really feel them, and how they, we had to very carefully, I remember, position them in the room. Like there was a certain space and place and, position for each one. It wasn't like, oh, just throw the paintings in there somewhere, because it was like positioning mandalas or something like that. There was that sacredness is so, like, it's subtle, but it's very powerful. And I was like, the last time I've been kind of, I suppose, blown away by something like that was when I was in Dharamsala at a nunnery of Jetsumna Tenzin Palmo. And she brought me into their temple, and she was, I just was like floored again. I was speechless by the paintings on the wall. And she was telling me the artist lived on site for 15 years. They were 15 years in the painting. I think it's the 21 Towers.
Oh.
It's like this living, breathing, like how you describe that gives me real insight into kind of, wow, that really was how I felt it. It must have been incredible. Like, creating art one dot at a time. I've painted in the past. I'm a messy painter. I get muddy colors, I get all over the place. I overdo it. I throw it, I get too much into it. Like, but it's so meticulous. Like each dot is so carefully, mindfully in that present moment put into place. Like it kind of blows my mind, if I'm honest, how long does it take? For especially the bigger pieces, like they must have taken How long?
There's one that I did that I particularly love. It's the Indian master that originally brought Buddhism into Tibet, Padmasambhava, and I got a little carried away with that one. I spent a year on it and working consistently on the piece. And I started out with larger dots, which weren't large. They were, if anyone knows about brushes, which I think you do, Kathy, I would start with like a 2-aught brush and or a number 2 brush, but then I got all the little round brush, and then I went all the way down to a 4-aught brush when I started to get to the center and to the face and some of the ritual objects. But on the but that one was 4 by 5 feet, so that was a large painting, and some of them were, others were that size, and then others were maybe 4 by 4 feet, and they would take, you know, anywhere from 4 to 6 months, depending upon the complexity and the amount of detail of the deity themselves. But there was each one was this, and speaking to Ramsey's comments earlier, there was a transformation that was happening. It was a spiritual event for me to be communing so intimately with the images that I remember painting the medicine Buddha and having physical issues coming out, revealing themselves, you know, so that I don't know that I would have otherwise realized and been able to get in front of them and things like that. So it was it was a relationship. It was a giving birth to something in each one of those. And I will say I loved it. I loved it. And I'm not painting now.
I was going to say, does this make, you're talking about it, does it make you want to pick up your brushes?
Here's what happens, Kathy. I think I have been called to a new path, because when I even think about it, this whole area of my neck and shoulder are in rebellion. 20 years of doing this, and I can't even think about it. No. Sometimes when I'm journaling, I'm training my left hand because my right hand is just it's tired. You know, and so, you know, the third major call of my heart came just as I'm in my early 60s, and just as I was approaching 60, I started to feel this. Okay. Now, it was about 30 when I took ordination. It was about 45 when I put my robes down. And then as I approached 60, I was like, okay, what's happening in this next phase of your life? So it was like the first 30 years of confusion, and then the next 30 years of the arts and the spiritual study. And then it's like, okay, what's now? If I could have another 30, I'm like, you know, I'm really good with it, you know. But then I keep saying that now every year that it passes. I'll take another one. But I felt that it was time to put down my brushes, put down my tools. My art rep, who has been my Linda Goldenstein, who has been my rep for a very long time, she had told me, if you never create another piece of art, you've created an amazing body of work. And I just took that as a grace, that, you know, it was okay, you know, to step into something new, even though, you know, I was getting that call again. And at that point, I decided I wanted to take what was lived within me in Sedona and take it outside of Sedona. And I wanted to continue creating, but now I'm creating with the tools of energy, of words. I feel inspired to lead and cultivate conversations about our awakening, about our personal power, about finding that love for ourselves, within ourselves, as we learn to love each other more fully, and as we learn to care for our planet more fully. And I believe that with painting with those resources is an opportunity to create a more peaceful and compassionate world. And so that's the energy I'm leaning into now. And those are the tools I'm seeking to create with.
Question. I'll get to this question after, but the first one would be, do you have some kind of courses or events that you work with people either one-on-one, in groups, to help them, not to help them, but to guide them through this kind of confusing time within their external life and also their internal struggle within themselves to fit with this evolving new energy on this earth?
Ramsey, you couldn't have said it better. Exactly what called to me at this phase in my life was to meet people where they are, to lend my voice to those that are like yourselves, who are leading this charge of helping us become more conscious in our lives, and then to connect with people who are peeking in and wondering, what is all this crazy that's going on? How can I find, how can I connect within myself and empower myself? And that is the story I wish to tell, because just like putting an intention in a dot, we can put intentions in every thought, every word, every deed. And so, yes, I am a mindfulness meditation teacher, and I feel like that is a powerful place where we can begin. We begin within. The entire journey, my own journey began within. I feel like that is the ground from where our power comes, and it comes through recognizing that each of our thoughts, each of our words, each of our deeds are creative sources. They are creative energy that is building the reality that we are experiencing. And so I love to bring people into the space of meditation, help them develop a more intimate relationship with themselves. What I find most people discover is that they are not as kind to themselves as they might be to others. And so developing some self-compassion is one of the early steps that we do. Awareness, learning to train our awareness, and then also to be able to build a toolbox that has tools in it for not only addressing what's going on within us, but what's going on between us as human beings. How do we recognize the oneness that is part of who we are, and how to recognize the hall of mirrors that we live in? When people are reflecting back to you, when they're reflecting things you don't like, how do we find compassion in that space and continue to show up as love? And so that is, I love doing talks. I am a big fan of traveling about and offering a keynote. And I also have some courses that I have developed that I offer both online or in a retreat setting that we can do in person. And so I think there's I see there's a website floating across the bottom of the page. And anyone who's interested in learning more about what I am offering can look in there. One of the programs that I have going now is a 6-part foundational meditation, mindful meditation course. And I'm offering that starting next Thursday.
Cool.
I'll probably do the cycle again if there's been some interest in doing it again. But in the fall, I'm looking to release a heart-centered leadership program, and that one has kind of set a little fire inside of me. So,
ooh, that sounds so cool. It's like, go ahead,
Sorry,
Ramsey.
Susie. For the listeners that are not watching, they're just listening, the website is shayglobal.com. /staying-connected. Staying-connected. You can check out the programs that is Shey working on. Back to Susie.
And that Shey
Yeah.
is with an E. It's SHEY.
Yeah. And it'll also be in the description under, if you're listening to this on a podcast, if you read below the audio, there'll be a description of Shey's website and links and stuff like that. So I'm really interested, Shey, you're coming out of like your own very personal journey, and now you're really bringing everything that you've learned along the way and offering it so generously to people. Because I know you do your regular, is it every second Sunday you do an online meditation?
Yes, I
a
love
lot of
that.
people come to my Mindful Mondays, or they're always checking in. Do you have the link for Shey's? So it's great that you're doing these online programs as well, because I find there's such a demand now. There's really a calling for it. But my question is about, I'm always thinking about, let's say, I love working with people individually, right? And even in the people who come in my online community they're just so committed, and I'm so, buoyed by their commitment. As long as they keep showing up, I keep showing up, but so they're self-selecting. Whereas when I worked in a more corporate environment, I felt like the corporation was putting me in there to kind of tick a box, sort of, that it was kind of the latest thing that they were going to put in there, and my question to you is it really possible to build a kind of spiritual community within that corporate setting? Because I personally don't think it's the right place. When people are at work, they're at work, they're there to earn a living. And I feel like the practice is so personal that it's a self-selected practice. So when you're in a more corporate or like executive leadership space, obviously if you're working independently with individual leaders, that's different. But are you working within communities within that corporate sector? Do you think that's a possibility?
Oh, such a beautiful question, Susie. And I am going to give that answer a resounding yes. And
Okay.
here's why. Here's why. We are speaking louder just by our presence than we do with our words.
Mm.
And so when we walk into a space, if we're holding that loving, compassionate intention within our own hearts, if we are recognizing the common humanity that we share, even with that person that works your last nerve, or that person that is pushing for something that you're pushing in a different direction, we still our common ground is our humanity. And if we meet each other in that space, just in that presence, we're creating change. So when I think about heart-centered leadership, it doesn't mean you have to be in some sort of position of higher influence. It means that you can lead by the choices that you make in each moment. It means with yourself, with your kindness to yourself, with your honoring yourself, with your being patient with yourself. That leads to cultivating the ability to be patient with others and to be able to choose love in each moment. And I know that can sound fluffy, but I am a big fan of the phrase from the Course in Miracles that if it's not love, it's a call for love. And so any situation has that opportunity, and you find those in a corporate environment. You find those when you're shopping in the grocery store. You find that when you're sitting in traffic and you want to get annoyed. Things are what they are. Just learning to be present and more mindful and intentional is a leadership quality that will translate into any kind of environment that you are in. And so I think that can be, it's almost stealth, it's almost invisible. And it's a personal choice that we would each make. What world do you want to live in?
Mm.
Be that person. Treat others and let go of the victim posture. We are not victims. We each are a creative force. And it is our consciousness that we are creating with. And if we take responsibility for that, then we can recognize that even that those people that challenge us it's like they've just handed us a heavier weight at the gym. They've handed us an opportunity to go a little deeper, to commit a little more firmly, to wake up within ourselves something with more intention and purpose and power. And so, yes, I believe that each one of us leads wherever we are. And I'm also going to say that many of our systems are broken. And I know all of you talk a lot about the divine masculine, the divine feminine. Both of those have a place in the world. Yet our masculine model of behavior is more competitive and it's more one-upping. And you find that a lot in a corporate environment. A more feminine model is the more collaborative model where we see each other's value and we support each other in being the best we can be, knowing we're connected and that it's going to be a win for all of us as we do that. So our systems are changing. The corporate environment is expressing as an old model. It does not need to be done away with. It can be transformed from within by all of those little choices. That's something my dots taught me. Every dot adds up. One dot on the canvas just looks like something you'd scratch off so you could start your painting. But every dot matters and it adds up to something unexpected and beautiful.
Wow.
Profound. Just a quick one. Kathy had a technical difficulties. Her computer crashed. So hopefully she'll connect with us before we're off. We still have 7 minutes, but she does apologize to everybody on the call. I like your way you took your painting and you made it about individualities within a collective. And the individuality within the collective is as important as the collective. And if I look at all the sages that I've listened to or read their books and so on, it's you don't change the world, you change yourself, and the world will change automatically around you. We're a drop of water in the ocean. We are the ocean and the drop of water. So we're all as important as everybody else within the collective. And I know we're billions and billions of people who feel like sometimes insignificant of what we do, but what we do impacts the 8 billion people that are around the globe. And I love the way you took it into your painting of and by the way, I don't know how you did that, but I did have a vision of how you did that. But every drop is just as significant as the other drop right next to it or as far away from it on that piece of canvas.
Yes, they are all essential.
Gorgeous.
We're all essential. We're amazing. We're amazing. Human beings are amazing. I mean, we can be, we can make a mess of things too, which we have in many ways. We've made a mess of things. And I say we because I'm in the mix. I'm not a victim to the world that I find myself in. I'm here with an opportunity to create change, to envision something new, and those are the conversations I'm interested in, and those are the opportunities that I think we all have. We can ask ourselves, where do I want to live? What world do I want to live in?
And take responsibility, I guess, isn't it? It's really like each one of us has to step into that individuality, empowered, that we're here for a purpose, we're here for a reason.
And we don't have to.
Yeah.
We can keep rolling with the status quo, or excuse me.
I don't know. I think the day comes when people kind of feel that there has to be more. You can go with the status quo to a degree, but I think sometimes something starts scratching you, or nudging you or poking you or something. And what I'm really interested in, Shay, is, how your own personal practice has probably evolved hugely from you, Shay, in her 30s, as a novice, and, Shay in her 60s, as an incredible, leader, mentor, and coach as well. So, I know as a meditation teacher, we have to, what do we say? We walk our talk, we have to have our own personal sadhana. And has your personal practice changed a lot or evolved much in the last couple of decades?
Yeah. Yes. And you know what? That's such a beautiful question, Susie, because I think that any of us can look, I can look, I guess I'll speak for myself, and see that there's a constant evolution. There's a constant shifting and changing. Some of the things that have stayed the same, my practice as a nun was very specifically Tibetan Buddhist practice in a formal environment, and it was beautiful and sacred and nourishing and amazing. And there's sometimes that I do miss those larger practices with all the deep chanting and the bells and cymbals and drums and ritual that went with that was so beautiful. And yet it has changed, and it's more, and then it moved to being my art was central to a lot of my practice. And now it is just as consistent, and maybe even more consistent, because it needs to find a steady pulse, a steady rhythm within, without the structure around me. So it is something that I rely on very much. And some of the elements that are the same are the practice of being present for my body, being present for how I'm caring for my body, am I eating well? Am I listening to my body? Am I giving myself the rest that I need? Maybe not always, but it's on my mind. But my meditation is so important to me. It's that quiet time of sitting in contemplation or silence at least once and twice a day. And then also being open to study and educating my mind, being open to learning more about what is not from well, I think sometimes people feel like looking at popular culture or looking at the news or something is educating yourself, and I'm not sure it's any of that's more than entertainment. But and there's nothing wrong with entertainment, if you're finding value and benefit, if it's soothing your system, or if it's calling, helping to call you to action. But reading poetry and reading things from the great philosophers throughout time, and some of the modern day philosophers and how they're managing what's going on in the world. I think are so many. We're living in the age of information, and we have the opportunity to access so much rich content, and even conversations like this, where you don't alone. You're like, oh, wow, I see other people are feeling like this. Other people are talking about these things. Oh, there are resources for me to plug into. I can find community anywhere, even on the World Wide Web, but I find it so rich to just continue to bathe in the ideas that are guiding us towards the possibility of seeing our world more clearly in its nature and understanding and kind of removing the veil of our own habits and conditioning so that we can get closer to something that we might be able to recognize as truth. So I would say those things are an important part of my personal practice.
Wow, I feel like we need another hour because I feel like we're just kind of really getting in now, but we'll definitely have you back, Shay. That is so interesting, and I do feel grateful that we're living in this age of this technological age because, I can be here in Ireland, Ramsey's in Peru, you're over in Kentucky, or I keep forgetting the name, Virginia, excuse me, and
we're in Sedona. I'm still technically a Sedona resident.
But we can be anywhere in the world and we can meet online and we can have this very nourishing, nurturing, hopeful conversation. And we can access the teachings and we can access the teachers and the books and the philosophies. And as you said, keep feeding ourselves. We just keep nourishing and nurturing ourselves through study and community, really, essentially. I think we grow a lot. So
we're feeding the field. Connected field of energy in which we all are, who we all are, and we feed that with our thoughts, our words, our conversations. So
I need to get you back on because I'm studying about dream yoga at the moment, and I've been reading like book after book, so I'd love to talk to you more about that if we can get you back on at some point. But I know Ramsey's probably going, whoa, we're over time. So I do know we need to wrap it up.
It's okay. We're 2 minutes over time. That's not a problem. Shay, it was awesome having you on the show. The inspiration that you brought in was amazing. And like Susie mentioned, would love to have you again sometimes in the second half of the year.
Thank you.
And for all our listeners, thank you very much for being with us today. I know it's just 3 minutes past the hour. We're good. We're having a blast. And we'll see you next week. Shay, thank you. And stay on the call. We'll see you in a sec.
Thank you.
Can I just interrupt and take another 20 seconds? Just to remind, if you're still on the call listening, we're doing a little workshop online called Tea with the Ancestors, and it's happening on the 25th of April online at noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. UK and Ireland. You get to bring a photo of your favorite ancestor, a cup of tea and a notebook and a kind of playful curiosity, and we're going to just do a little ritual and connect in and have some fun. So everybody is welcome and absolutely no experience is necessary. Now, if you want to get a discount when you register, you just have to type in the coupon code subscribed and that'll give you €6 off. So that's my plug-in. Sorry for going over time. Thank you.
It's all good. You'll find the course on in12d.com event details. We'll see you next week.